give you my card. I'm from PG.
He would love to.
Oh, yes.
It will be fantastic. And I think in Peru, Colombia, Chile have been doing their effort too. And
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Paul Beckett. I'm the Washington Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal. Why am I here? The Wall Street Journal, I was lucky enough to be the South Asia Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal for 6 years, where I got to know Parul and Gautam, and microfinance and financial inclusion issues in general were of great interest to us then and continue to be. So I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. We're going to be talking about replicable models and collaborative action in micropensions. We're all up here very conscious that we are all that stands between you and cocktails. So we will try not to keep you more than 3 or 4 hours. Just very quickly to introduce the very distinguished panel that we have, going from down here, we have Parul Sathkana, who is the director of Pinbox Solutions. Next to her, we have Carlos Ramirez, who's the president of CONSAR in Mexico. We have Michael McCord, who's the president of the Microinsurance Center. Just to my left here is Mohammed Muzan Chaudhry. He's the secretary of in the Ministry of Finance in Bangladesh. On my right here, we have Krishnan Narasimhan. He's the deputy program manager of the Pacific Financial Inclusion Program. And on my far right, we have Moses Bakabie. He is a senior advisor to the Finance Ministry of Uganda. I think we're going to be following a similar pattern to previous panels, where each of the panelists will have a pretty strict 5 minutes or less on what they would like to talk about on our chosen topic today of replicable models and collaborative action. Then we will have a brief discussion on the panel, just some questions I would love to hear answered, and then we will open it up to all of you, and I promise that we will wrap it all up by 6 o'clock. So maybe I could start on my right here with Moses. Could you tell us what's on your mind on this topic at the moment? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I just say a few words and summary of what I've picked up here, and that's what is relevant to Uganda, where you come from. In Uganda, in terms of expanding pension to the informal sector and for micro pensions, we still have, as my colleague previously said, David, we are undertaking some reforms in this area. But in terms of what we can do today, there's no legal or regulatory constraint in terms of digital pension expansion. So we can work with whatever is existing in order to start this task of ensuring that there is pension inclusion and also expansion to the informal sector. Also, what I heard from the discussion here is that the constraints and solutions are not unique across countries, across systems, whether they're public or private. I think what is important is to learn from each other and see what works, what doesn't work, and what can be replicated. Because I don't think there is value in reinventing the wheel, because I think there are so many models that can be where we can learn from. In terms of what we've been discussing today, in terms of expanding these programs, I think it's important that we have champions and then to have collaborative efforts in terms of, building frameworks for pension inclusion, meaning working with the central banks, working with the pension regulators, insurance, capital markets, and also the Ministry of Finance at a policy level. So there is need for political commitment and leadership. Without political commitment and leadership, there's very little we can achieve. So it's going to be important going forward to see how and how best to engage the policymakers in terms of understanding what is in there for them. Because with the policymakers, what they need is to find a solution to the issues that they have. If they can't find that kind of solution in whatever you're trying to do, it becomes very difficult. We need to keep the momentum. I think there are a number of initiatives that have been started in Rwanda, in Kenya. It's just beginning in Uganda, India, also enrollment in UK. So I think we need to keep the momentum and then be able to provide the solutions to most of the people in the informal sector. There are some people who think that the pension, like the informal sector people can't save. They can actually save. What is required is to build trusted institutions. So the role of the public sector is really to ensure that there is good governance, there are institutions that can be trusted, so that there's confidence in terms of attracting both the formal and the informal people in terms of pension contributions. So what is the way forward? In the case of Uganda, we are looking at, we've been working and collaborating with the Pinbox. We've been working together with the World Bank in terms of the reforms, in terms of regulation, in terms of supervision, and we're working with the World Bank as well in terms of expanding pension to the informal sector. What we need to do is to try and build a collaborative effort, as I mentioned, involving various jurisdictions in the financial sector in order to leverage some of these capacities, and also to try and consult with or undertake consultations with the policymakers in order to have buy-ins, because as I said, the policymakers, they're looking for solutions. If the solutions we are coming up with talk to the issues that they have, the constraints that they have in their political spectrum, I think that will be a good way of trying to have a buy-in into what we are trying to do. So in summary, I think this is a good initiative. It requires pension champions. We need commitment, political commitment, and I think it's something that can be done. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Christian, your thoughts?
Thanks, Paul. Very good afternoon to all of you. So I represent the Pacific Financial Inclusion Program, which is a joint initiative of the UN Development Program and the UN Capital Development Fund. We would, I would also like to thank the Pinbox for this opportunity. In the Pacific, we have a core mandate to work on financial inclusion. And the three work streams that we have as a PFIP is financial innovation, policy and regulation, and consumer empowerment. So the work that we have done and we are doing across the 6 countries in the Pacific is on a suite of various financial products, which includes mobile money, mobile banking, branchless banking, micro-insurance, and the latest addition has been micro-pension. We have done partnerships, collaborations with the superannuation fund providers in Fiji and Solomon Islands. Many of you would have heard the Solomon Islands Central Bank Governor talking about it this morning. So that was a PFIP supported project. It is now reached its final stages of validation, and they are going in for scale up early on from next year. So the Pacific is a very tough geography to work in. The 6 countries that I mentioned, which include Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu, have only a total population of around 10 million. And 80% of them are in the informal sector. and very little by way of social security by government is in place, and therefore the need for people to save for their old age is there. But like culturally, it has been so that there's no abject poverty as it exists in certain other parts of the world, but there's poverty of opportunity. You would not find any, like any person complaining of lack of food or like shelter. Basic things are taken care of. What they have is a lack of opportunity towards better housing, higher education, so on and so forth. And when we did the feasibility assessments, we found that many people wanted to put away something for their old age. And that led to our working collaboratively with the National Superannuation Fund providers, which is largely like what public sector, but board driven. And there are also limited investment opportunities in these markets. So how do you get them to give a decent return that they will not get in other investments? So these were the initial challenges that we faced. So using technology, we have found effective ways of distribution. There have been willing both telco and bank partners who have offered their channels for distribution and both for recurring savings collection. So that was mentioned as a challenge by some of the earlier speakers. We could address that challenge in the pilot. For example, in Fiji, there's a tie-up with the M-Pesa, Vodafone M-Pesa, which is unique to that market. In Solomon Islands, there's this Australian bank called ANZ Bank, which has offered its mobile banking platform, including, OTC transactions where you could go to an agent and pay for your voluntary like pension contribution. Some of the key challenges that still exist are establishing the business viability and like financial feasibility. So during the pilot validation phase, we largely supported through grants, but when it goes for scale up, we will have to take these considerations for scale up. So that is being worked out right now. There is keen interest for collaboration among other like Pacific countries as well. And I must mention the biggest Pacific country that we would be now trialing out is PNG, which has about 7.5 million people there. And there is keen interest both from the regulator and from the biggest superannuation fund there for replicability. We hope that in the new year, we would be entering that market as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Sir. Yes, sir.
At the very outset, I thanks Pinbox and for inviting me to this session. In fact, in the context of collaborative actions on the regarding micro pensions and the coverage of the pensions of the formal and both informal sector, I think Bangladesh took the initiative in a sequential form. That first we started identifying the civil service pensions with the NID system. So around 0.7 million pensioners now identified in a database, and with the help of IT system, there is central record system is being developed, and now we are embarking on a system that to start payments of the pensions to the civil service pensioners. They are of course DV on a DV basis from G2P, straight from the treasury to the pensioners account, either postal account or mobile financial service, or to the regular bank account. And also we are embarking on a policy like that to decide on a cutoff point, that from that point the new entrant in the civil service will be made contributory pensioners, on a DC basis. And as far as the coverage of the formal sectors, other than the government sectors, we are having a policy document. We already drafted a policy document, and yet to be placed in the cabinet for approval, but there is stakeholders consultations are done to create a separate authority to handle the pensions and some record-keeping organizations, and also identified that should be in place. But the big challenge we are facing, that the scope for investment of the pension fund. As our other Kishanan was saying, that there is a very limited scope of investment opportunity inside the country, because we don't have the vibrant capital market to get the investment from the pension fund. So, and also trust and reliability of alternative investment opportunity in the infrastructure financing, and all these are also somewhere this is missing. So in that case, the main problem is that if we create a DC basis pension fund, but when accumulated fund, the investment opportunity to get a decent return, that is the big challenge. So in that context, I think we are in a discussion with the multilateral development agencies, World Bank and ADB, to create some, and also other regional forum like SARC, South Asian Regional Forum, that to have some collaborative approach to create an opportunity for investment regionally or internationally, and at the same time, that certain percentage of the fund in some structured manner to be invested locally to create a developed capital market in the country. So that sort of discussions we are having at the moment. And it's like a chicken-egg situations, that if you don't have the investment opportunity, then we don't get you cannot create an incentive in the system to have a contributory pension fund system. But at the same time, if you don't create a fund, also you cannot take the challenge also. This sort of challenges already is there. So we hope that in a phased manner, we'll be able to have some sort of system where we can have an alternative scope for pension fund and investment for pension fund, and also create a decent return for the old age pensioners, both for the formal sector and also in the long run, informal sector also can be taken on board. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Michael?
Thank you very much, Paul, and good afternoon to everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. We've talked about the value chain, we've talked about regulations, we've talked about governance and those issues. I want to talk about clients themselves and how we focus on trying, at least, to generate success among clients. And one of the things that we use at the Microinsurance Center is a mnemonic that we call SUAVE, S-U-A-V-E, SUAVE, or for those of you from Latin America, suave. And so we say, good pensions, good microinsurance is suave. And so the letters, the S is simple, understood, accessible, valuable, and efficient. And so we try to apply these to the different kinds of products that we're putting together and trying to develop. And in terms of simple, there's been discussion around simple a number of times. We're talking about very simple terms. And you know, when I think about annuities and I think about simplicity, those two don't go together very well. But we have to really think about, if we're going to actually have an impact on the self-employed market, the low-income market, then we need to have simple terms. We need to have simple processes. I suspect in Bangladesh, when they go to sell products there, a lot of the clients who will potentially get pensions will not read. And so how do we convey this information to them? How do we help them? So it's got to be very, very simple product in order for us to be able to express it simply. We talk about simple documentation. And here we're not just talking about just small documentation, we're talking about syntax, and we're talking about language. It should definitely be in the language that people do read, but it should be also in simple, simple words. So really very, very simple products. Premium collection needs to be simple. Payments and claim settlement needs to be simple. When it's time to start getting our money back, that needs to be a simple process. Sometimes I see that the front end, paying premiums, is very easy, but the companies have made it very difficult. Companies or governments have made it very difficult to get the settlements and the payments that people are deserving. So that's simple. In terms of understanding, things have to be, we have to provide clear and simple information. Clear and simple information that requires the simple product, the simple processes. We have to think about touch. If we're going to get people to understand, what we've seen in studies that we've done is that when we're looking at touch, actual human interaction, and no touch, we see sales on both levels. But on the no touch level, we see much more men, much more wealthier people. We see people with already financial expertise or experience at least. In the no touch, or in the touch side, that's where we see people who actually are women who have low income. And so we have to think about this. As we move towards more technology, which we've heard again from almost everybody, as we move to more technology, we have to be thinking about that level of touch that people actually need if we're going to include low income people in this market. One of the ways that a number of institutions and governments work on this is through call centers and even having outgoing calls. We have a company that we know of that does long-term savings linked to insurance, and they do outcalls of 25% of their clients to make sure that their clients understand the product. We have to be proactive in making sure that people understand. We talk about this persistency problem, and part of that problem is because people don't understand, because they're not getting touch, because they're not getting linked up. There's no tangibility to the products. We have to show and promote that people are actually getting paid. People often, low-income people often have a negative attitude towards any kind of insurance or pensions, anything that they're putting money into that is intangible, and they're expecting benefits back. In terms of accessible, so that's simple and understood, we need to think about accessible. How do we make it accessible to them? We talked to a government in a country in Africa, and they were saying that they have a pension program, but they can't seem to get low-income, self-employed people to pay the premiums. And so I said, well, what are you having them, how do they pay the premiums? Well, at the end of the month, they come to the capital city, they come to our office, they make the payment after they tell us how much money they made. It's never going to work. Never going to work, okay? So it has to be accessible in ways that people are comfortable in addressing and accessing these products. There has to be portability. I've heard that a couple times, but there has to be portability. These people are going to be self-employed today. They may be unemployed tomorrow. They may be temporarily employed next week. That's too much flexibility for them to have to be fixed without the ability to have portability. They need immediate access to information. If I can key in some numbers on my mobile phone to tell me how much balance I have, shouldn't I be able to do that with my pension too? I think so. People need accessibility. I think we need to think that, that accessibility is really a cornerstone of people being able to transact with us. We need to address the fears of giving government intervention. We have to find some way of putting up a firewall between the clients, because they're not going to tell us. They're not going to tell us how much money they made last month. And they're afraid of taxes and they're afraid of other things. But we have to find ways of dealing with that. We have to think about value. So we have simple, understood, accessible. We have to think about value. How do we create value for low-income people? And tangibility is one way in which we see this happening and having some some benefits in terms of how do we do something other than simply paying our payment every month and hoping that eventually we'll get our benefit. So there are a number of things that can happen in terms of value through informational value, through SMSs, or I heard somebody talk about education on phone access. And we hear about discounts that you can get at supermarkets or at drugstores because you're a member of this pension, okay? So these kinds of things make things more tangible for people and help them to see that there's real value for them. Of course, the benefit has to be linked to need. We have to be thinking about the financial benefit. We heard in the last session that 80% of pensions, the pension money that you get, is from accumulation of income, of earnings. We have to think about how we make that happen, because accumulating that money in a way that we can make this happen efficiently is really critical to being able to do this in a manner where we've got the money. We need to understand the market. If we're going to create value, we have to understand the market. And for us, this always means some kind of demand research, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. We have to understand the market, and we have to design products in ways that create that value, that are simple. So we need to think about efficiency also, the last one. We have simple, understood, accessible, valuable, and efficient. We absolutely need auto collection of premiums. I keep seeing efforts to get people to come and pay premiums or to send someone out to get your weekly, monthly pension payments. It doesn't work. Every time that happens, it's a new purchase decision, and you don't get the kind of sustainability that you have. So you have to do it somehow automatically. You have to link with larger aggregators to help collect some of that money. That also provides some of the incentive for people to do that. And we've heard a lot about technology, and technology is a way that we can definitely help to make this more efficient. But technology both on the front end and the back end to make it more efficient for institutions in the back. So success is going to be revolving around suave products, simple, understood, accessible, valuable, and efficient. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for literally spelling that out for us. Carlos?
Yes. Thank you. I think we have a slide that basically brings all the ideas together on what we are doing in Mexico that could be, I mean, to answer the question that we're being asked to, is the model replicable? Let me talk for 5 minutes on what we've been doing in Mexico and basically answer it by itself, right? So we've been, the past 3 or 4 years, we've been developing a model that tries to tackle two big problems. We have a mandatory system. 59 million Mexicans have saved in the system at some point, 170 billion US dollars, 15% of GDP, 11 pension providers. I mean, the system has already been built, right? The infrastructure in itself is there. We have a central clearinghouse that makes it available for 850,000 employers to pay on a monthly basis the amount of money that people are saving. But we have huge challenges, right? We have 6 out of 10 Mexicans not contributing. We have low levels of contribution. We have almost negligible voluntary savings. So we have, and obviously a huge informal market. So we have basically the same problems as that we've heard for all during the day. So what we've done is basically, and we just launched it a couple months ago, the Minister of Finance actually launched it, is a new app called Afore Móvil, mobile service pension provider, right? So what does this magic thing does really, because I still am amazed to what we developed in the past years, is basically it provides people the facility to either open an account, right, if they don't have one, through their mobile, or save. If they have already one, basically download it and start saving voluntarily. So let me explain very briefly what are the parts of the model that we think that have to be understood, and certainly a lot of them have been already mentioned. We had a citizen ID number, so obviously that allowed us to go forward with this project. We introduced biometrics, so now we have an official ID validation, either through face recognition or through basically the hand recognition, right? That we introduced 3 years ago. We have almost 6 million Mexicans already with biometric identification into the system. That's obviously is going to be a gradual process, but it's working well. We have developed an online connection with the 11 pension providers. So all pension providers are linked into the system. So this is a universal system that everyone can come into the model. And something that has been very helpful, we have a national pension database and a central clearinghouse and central database that has allowed us, obviously, to bring the 59 million clients, or at least allow them to download the app and find their pension account and either start saving, or if they don't have an account, start saving, right? So that has allowed us, for example, to bring, we are just starting, but to bring the independent workers, the informal workers, that in the past they had to go to an office and do all the paperwork. Obviously, during the first 20 years of the system, no one did it. We basically had no independent workers because it was very difficult. We also allowed children to open accounts. Obviously not the children, their parents, but parents can download the app and start saving for their children. We also did a program of cash-in networks, right? We have already 7,000 contact points through the 7-Elevens that were earlier mentioned, 7-Elevens and other stores, where you can basically go to the store and save 2 euros, right? 50 pesos, 2 euros, approximately $3. And you can basically save, right? And you can do it immediately. You can, in your app, it will show immediately the moment you are saving in the convenience store. So that obviously helps for trust issues. We have an aggregator that has allowed us to bring all the banks together, right? So in the app, you have all the Mexican banks are there, right? So you can put your debit card or your credit card from any bank, you can do it. So we have 22 million valid credit cards and 64 million debit cards that basically where you can save with those without any problem. And we also have a U.S. bank where migrants, Mexican migrants, there's 11 million of them here in the U.S. So you can be here in D.C. and you can open a pension fund and you can start saving from here. And you can also do it if you have already, obviously, if you have an account. The other thing we've worked we've tried to put a lot of emphasis on information, right? So the app allows you to do simple exercises through calculators, links to websites where there's a lot of financial education issues, but even financial education issues in the app, right? So when you download the app, there's a specific area where you find some issues that can help you to understand basic issues. And finally, we've been developing a loyalty program, bringing people from the private sector that can help us to obviously increase the scale of people into the app. Let me just briefly mention one very important one, which is called Miles for Retirement. This is an initiative that comes from the private sector, where basically people, when they can download a different app, not ours, a different app, and they can basically say, well, if I'm going to restaurants, or if I'm going to the supermarket, or if I'm going to anywhere, right? The restaurants is more high-income guys, but you can, in the time when you're consuming, right, you also save. So you can say, okay, I'm going to put 2% of my monthly food spending into my pension account, and you can do it automatically through our app. And also bringing different sectors, particularly in Mexico, the domestic employees. There's almost 3 million domestic employers that are there, that basically we're trying to bring them on board through this app, and we have also we've been working with a firm that basically brings them on, and through the app you can start saving for your future. Open an account. So finally, let me just finish. I mean, these are the topics we've been working on. There is certainly some areas that are replicable, some that don't. But overall, we feel that this app could be outsourced. I mean, other countries could look at it and see what we're doing. We obviously haven't solved the demand issue, the demand problem. The demand problem remains there. How many people are going to download the app? Right, that's the question. And how many people are going to save after downloading? Well, that remains to be seen. But at least the infrastructure issues, the supply side issue, we think we've developed a model that could be looked in other places and see the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Peru.
Thank you, Paul. I think I'm very excited about the conference today because we've been hearing so many representatives from so many countries talk about what they've been doing in their nations and perhaps face the same problems as all the others. In fact, I was talking to Eric here from Rwanda, and he was saying that this is so good to be able to see other countries talk about the same problems. He said, I may not necessarily agree with all their solutions, but it helps me clear my mind. That brings me to the point of replicable solutions, is to say that all of us here seem to be talking about the same issues which were pointed out by Michael a while ago about financial literacy, portability, payments, helpline, access, management. Carlos here has found a solution on the supply side to address all these issues, and it's a matter of time when you actually move towards a complete digital solution. It is these replicable models that we think can bring or help solve the issues of digital pension inclusion. So if there's something that India has done and that has worked, and that has equally been tried by Mexico, and it is now being tried by Eric in Rwanda, why is that solution and conversation not being put through to everybody here in the room? And that's the reason I think it makes me very happy that everybody here seems to be talking about it. And I think Will Price and Gautam Bharadwaj, thank you for having brought this, for all of us to be able to say this together. When I talk about replicable solutions, why is it that we could perhaps think of, and John, I would love to get your thoughts on this, is to be actually able to think of regional models. So could there be like an Africa model that could work? Could there be a Pacific model? Because Governor Rarawa a while ago said that, listen, I don't have national ID and I don't have mobile phones or a greater pension